Whew, it is so hot, but I'm here to talk about books. I'm going to do a little bit of a detour. It's not really a detour because it's still about books, but over the next couple of months, I'm trying to be a bit more intentional about reading way more than I'm writing because I haven't been feeling as confident and, good about my writing over the past few weeks. I just feel as if it's missing something and there's like no substance, or I just can't get a grip on the craft of it all. And I think what that means is I need to spend as much time consuming literature as I am trying to produce it. And so over the next couple of months, I'm so excited because I am stacking my TBR and I'm just going to read as much as possible and try to catch up with a lot of the titles that have been making the rounds of late that I haven't been paying attention to. So, I'm going a little bit back to my booktube roots and I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I am excited to take part in this challenge of women in translation for the month of August. And I know that the trend itself is about reading authors who have been translated into the English language. But for a couple of the titles, I'm actually going to read them in their original language, which is French, because those are the copies that I could get a hold of. But before I get into all of that, my name is Dominique, and I am a reader and writer, and this is my space for documenting my journey to becoming a published author. And for now, it's going to be semi-booktube channel, but let's get into what I'm reading right now. I am rereading Eve Out of Her Ruins. In French, it is Eve de ses décombres. And this book is about 4 Mauritian teenagers who are living in a very poor neighborhood on the island of Mauritius. And I read this back in like 2018, and I remember I absolutely loved it. It was a very violent read, a very sad read, a very vibrant read. And I just hadn't really experienced anything like that, where every line was so poetic, but the story itself was also very much substantial and not just fluff without anything underneath it. And as I said, it follows these 4 teenagers. There's Sadiq, who starts the story, and I always love that first line where he says, I am Sadiq, but everyone calls me Sad. And I remember reading it in English, not knowing if the play on words actually made sense, but of course it does. And then there's Eve, who Sadiq is in love with, and she has started to use her body as currency, as her source of power. And it's such a tragic story, but the way that it's told, you kind of feel her sense of empowerment. And then there's her friend Savita, who loves Eve as any friend would, or just in the most pure form of friendship. And then there's Clelio, who I have to say, when I read it in English, I remember being so disturbed by him and also so almost like nurturing. He was so sad because his brother had left for France and he had said he would send for him, but on every page, you can see his anger and his distress for his brother never having finally done this. And so I've just gotten to about a third of the novel. Whenever I'm reading in French, it really does take me a long time. I wish I could say I read really quickly in French, but I don't. And I have to look up words all of the time. But even with the length of time it's taking me to actually, make it through each page, it still vibrates with the same energy of when I read it in English. So I have to say that I still recommend this book so, so much. Eve Out of Her Ruins, if you do look for the title in English. And it's also really short. I think it's it's less than 200 pages, and the chapters are really short too. Each bit of it is told in 2 to 3 pages. So can't recommend that enough. And then I read Jacqueline Harpmen's I Who Have Never Known Men. And I've been hearing about this book for a really long time, and I was always so, intrigued because of the title, but I don't think I was expecting the story to be exactly what it was. And it tells the story of these 40 women who are captive and living in this underground bunker. And then by some apocalyptic event that they're unsure of, they survive and they are freed from this bunker because there was a key at a certain moment, and just by chance, by luck. And the 40 women are going out back into the world and trying to figure out what is out there for them and trying to survive, essentially. And the youngest of the 40, who has never known the real world or known what the world was like before this bunker, is the one who is narrating the story and taking us through their journey of just trying to find some semblance of a life after everything that they've been through. I don't think there's a way to really put all of what I experienced while I was reading this book into words. But I will say that there was this moment in the very beginning, and it's there's a line in it. It says, "It must have happened in the hazy period in the early days of our captivity for such a deep fear to have taken hold of us." And I remember when I was reading that, I just kept thinking of how embedded into our psyche, into our DNA, certain forms of oppression, whether it's sexism or racism or just anything that's harming you and trying to dehumanize you or just make you feel inferior, that's imprisoning you within your own body, within your own life, just how embedded that actually is. And on a spiritual level, what it means to not only honor that fear and where it came from and the actual harm it has done to the people that had to survive in order for you to survive where you are. And I know it sounds like it's a lot, but that line, this part in particular, made me think of this line from James Baldwin where he says, "Your crown has already been paid for. All you have to do is put it on."
I remember James Baldwin said once, "You've already been bought and paid for. Your ancestors already gave it up for you. It's already done. You don't have to do that anymore. Now you can love yourself. It's already possible."
And so as you're reading this novel, you're going from realizing that these women have been in prison for so long and you understand why their fear has built up the way that it has. But then because of this one young narrator who is not as fearful as they are, you realize all you have to do is put your crown on and go out there and explore and follow your curiosity and seek knowledge and seek everything as far as your imagination will allow you. So I just read it, and my bookseller who recommended me the book also just asked me to run a book club for it. And so I'm really looking forward to that. So I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpmen, cannot recommend that enough. Next on the list of books to read for the month of August is Clarice Lispector's Daydream and Drunkenness of a Young Lady. This one is a really, really short one. I was having a bit of a conundrum trying to choose which Lispector title I wanted to go with. And I was gonna get a collection of stories, but because of everything else that I got on my list, I was like, I'll save that one for later. But I read The Hour of the Star earlier this year, and that was my first Lispector. And this one is about 3 tales of these women, and it says their secret desires, fears, and madness. And so it's, you know, not that much of a synopsis, but I'm really looking forward to it. And I know that it comes from a collection of stories called Family Ties, I believe. So this one will definitely be like a really quick, maybe morning or afternoon read. And Clarice Lispector is Brazilian, but she's originally from Ukraine. And yeah, she was a Brazilian author. So next up on the list is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. And I hope I'm saying that right. But this is a story of a rather reclusive, eccentric woman who lives in this Polish village. And she's more of an animal person than she is a people person. And I believe 2 of her dogs go missing. And then some members of a hunting group or some members of some sort of group go missing, or no, they are murdered. Members of a local hunting club are found murdered, and she joins this investigation to see what went on in this village. And it says it's an unconventional crime story. And I was speaking with a student, I teach English to Polish students, and she said that it has a very interesting, Olga Tokarczuk has a very interesting way of telling stories, and there's a bit of humor in it, and it's very profound. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this because I don't really know a lot about any Eastern European literature or authors, and hopefully this will be a nice little entry point into that. And then next up on the list is not actually, it doesn't qualify for women in translation because I've learned that Yael van der Wouden has written this book in English originally. And she is a Dutch author. And this story is about 2 women that are living in a very small Dutch countryside house. And they are polar opposites. So I'm really looking forward to that because if you know by now, I have been working on a short story series about these two women who are best friends, and they are polar opposites. And I think I have a thing about, you know, like female duo ships and just seeing how their stories intertwine and the stories that can be told. So I'm really looking forward to this. It's also a bit of historical fiction, I believe, because it happens after the Second World War, and Isabel has a solitary life. Meanwhile, Eva is a little bit of an out there type of person. So that is what's next on the list. And I also haven't read any Dutch authors, so that's going to be really cool. Next, I'm going to be reading Maryse Condé's Segu. And I just read her biography, which was really interesting. I read that in French as well. And I've been on this kick of reading literature and reading books in French because I've just discovered that I actually can. And I realized that like I can speak enough French now to like make it through a book. I still read very, 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 very slowly. But it's been really fun and exciting and like a challenge for my brain. So I'm going to read Segu in French. And I'm not going to lie, I'm very intimidated because the text is so small and it's like 450, it's over 400 pages of story. Segu is the story told of this empire in 18th century Africa. And what's interesting is that there are forces coming in from the east, Muslim forces, and then there's the slave trade that's happening from the western part of the continent. And Segu is somewhere in the middle there, and there's an advisor to the king who has 4 sons who are caught up in the tumultuous, the storm of these 2 forces that are coming through. And what follows is just this exploration of what was actually going on around that time, and just perhaps the political and the spiritual, the effects it had on the humanity and the culture, and just everything that has transpired, we know, between Africa and the rest of the world. So I'm so looking forward to reading this book. I've been pretty obsessed with Condé of late. She is a Guadeloupean author who passed away, I believe, last year or 2023. And she's just been a giant in Francophone literature that I've been, just wanting to read. And I never got a chance to read her in English. And for some reason, I've decided I'm going to start reading her in French. But that is the challenge that I'm giving myself. So that is what's also on the list. And finally, I'm going to be reading my first female Portuguese author in English, Lydia George, The Wind Whistling in the Cranes. And I have been trying to read more Portuguese literature. And the problem that I normally run into is that a lot of Portuguese literature is not translated to English. And I think that that's probably starting to change a lot more now. And this is the story of 2 families in a coastal town somewhere in Portugal in the 1990s. And I believe it centers around a canning factory. And one of the families is the wealthy family who owns this canning factory and employs the second family who work in the canning factory. And at some point, one of the wealthy family members dies, and a young family member is the one to start intertwining the families in a way that threatens political or financial ruin for her family, the wealthy family. And I'm really excited to finally read this and just see where all of the mixing and mingling goes on. And also just to like understand a little bit more about Portuguese culture and literature, and just see what it's all about. This is going to be quite the treat, and I'm really looking forward to it. So that's what I'm going to be reading in the month of August. Let me know what's on your TBR, and I can't wait to come back and tell you what I think of these reads. And if you'd like, you can follow me on TikTok. I'll probably be talking about them a lot more on there, and also on Instagram. Don't forget to hit like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to come back for the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.